In this lesson, we're going to be exploring reflexive verbs in German. Los geht's! So first, let's look at some of the things that are overarching understandings about reflexive verbs in German. The first thing that you need to understand is that reflexive verbs work in a combination with a reflexive pronoun. The reflexive pronoun sich is similar to oneself in English. The reflexive pronoun refers to a person who is both the subject and object, both direct or indirect, of the sentence. And contrary to reflexive verbs in English, reflexive verbs in German are always used with a reflexive pronoun. So we're going to explore each of these points throughout this lesson. For my German 3 students, this is a comprehensive list of all of the reflexive verbs that we will be learning and using during Unit 6. These come from multiple vocabulary lists and will be used in the exercises that we'll be practicing, and you'll see them in some of the examples in this lesson. They are sich anziehen, sich ausziehen, sich baden, sich berühren, sich brechen, sich duschen, sich erbrechen, sich erkälten, sich fühlen, sich kämen, sich putzen, sich rasieren, sich schminken, sich strecken, sich umarmen, sich verletzen, sich waschen, und sich wehtun. Moving forward in your German studies, if you see a vocabulary list and you see sich in front of a verb, this is going to indicate that it is a reflexive verb. Again, this is just a list of the verbs that we'll be working on in Unit 6. There are many, many, many reflexive verbs in the German language that you will see from here forward reflected on vocabulary lists. There is a note about the verb sich putzen. On the previous page, you might have noticed that sich putzen means to clean. And while it does mean that, in German, sich putzen is combined with a few other body parts, and it really changes the meaning of sich putzen. Our first example is sich die Zähne putzen, to brush one's teeth. So technically that says cleaning one's teeth, but in English we say brush one's teeth. So sich die Zähne putzen is to brush one's teeth. And an example, and then we're going to explore how these sentences are put together in a moment. But an example of this is ich putze mir die Zähne, I brush my teeth. A second example of sich putzen, not quite meaning to clean, is sich die Nase putzen, to blow one's nose. Although technically when you blow your nose, you're kind of cleaning it out. In English, we say to blow one's nose. In German, sich die Nase putzen, to clean the nose. And a Beispiel, putzt sich die Nase, he blows his nose. So these two example sentences are kind of a preview of what we're going to be talking about as far as the structure and word order of sentences in reflexive. Of the verbs for this unit, there are 4 that are irregular verbs. And as a reminder, irregular verbs are generally only irregular in the du and the RCS forms. I recommend pausing the video and jotting these down in your notes, as it just takes time and use and practice to remember the irregular forms of verbs. So sich brechen, the irregular du form, E changes to I, so du brichst, and RCS bricht. Sich erbrechen, du erbrichst, and RCS erbricht. Sich waschen, we go from a regular A to an A umlaut, du wäscht, und RCS wäscht. Sich wehtun, du tust weh, und RCS tut weh, and that is a separable prefix verb. I include baden here not because it's technically irregular, but sometimes people forget that you have to add the E between a D and the conjugated ending. So for example, du badest gets an E added here instead of du badst. It just makes it flow a little better, but to make it du badest und RCS badet. So sich baden, not technically irregular, but it does have an extra rule there that we sometimes forget about. When the subject of the sentence is also the direct object of the sentence, we use the accusative case. And this is what we have always done when we have a direct object. The direct object is in the accusative case. Now we're going to be talking about the reflexive pronouns being in the accusative case. The pairings that you see here should be taken down in your notes, so pause the video and write these down. So for ich, the reflexive pronoun is mich, and in English the best translation is to say myself, but we're going to explore this a little later in the video, that sometimes we don't even translate these in English, but the reflexive pronoun is always there in German. If the subject is du, the reflexive pronoun is dich, meaning yourself. If the subject is the reflexive pronoun is sich, meaning himself. If the subject is sie, the reflexive pronoun is sich, meaning herself. If the subject is es, the reflexive pronoun is sich, meaning itself. If the subject is wir, the reflexive pronoun is uns, meaning ourselves. If the subject is ihr, the reflexive pronoun is euch, meaning yourselves. And if the subject is sie and also the sie formal, the reflexive pronoun is sich, meaning themselves, or yourself if it were formal. And now let's take a look at these in context. So as a reminder, when the subject of the sentence is also the direct object, the accusative case, and thus the accusative reflexive pronoun, is used. If I have the verb sich waschen, to wash, ich wasche mich, I wash myself. Wäschst du dich? Are you washing yourself? So this is my reflexive pronoun, and it's in the accusative because I wash. Whom do I wash? I wash myself. Wäschst du dich is in the accusative. Are you washing? Whom are you washing? Are you washing yourself? Gets me the direct object, dich. With another verb, sich rasieren, to shave. Rasiert sich. He is shaving. So as I've mentioned, and in our overview and on the last slide, I said that sometimes in English, we don't use a reflexive pronoun, but in German, you must always include a reflexive pronoun. So if you see a verb with sich and the verb, so for example, sich rasieren, in German, you would always have rasiert sich. In English, it's just assumed that he's probably shaving himself. So he is shaving. We often wouldn't say he is shaving himself. It's just an implied reflexive pronoun in English. In German, there's no implication. We always indicate it with a reflexive pronoun. So rasiert sich. Now, in reflexive sentences, the subject of the sentence can also be an indirect object, and if it's the indirect object, then the dative case is used. In this chart, you'll notice that only 2 of our reflexive pronouns changed. The only ones that we really have to think about in all of this is if the subject is ich or du. When it was the direct object, ich's reflexive pronoun was mich, and the reflexive pronoun for du was dich. In the dative case, the subject is ich and the reflexive pronoun is mir, still meaning myself, but now it's for an indirect object situation. If the subject is du, the reflexive pronoun is dir, still meaning yourself. So the English translation doesn't change on any of these reflexive pronouns. The only ones that change are ich to mir and du to dir versus ich and mich and du and dich. So let's take a look at some examples of where this happens, where this indirect object exists. If we look at the same verb, sich waschen, to wash. Ich wasche mir die Hände. So I wash my hands. It's a bit different in German. We don't have ich wasche meine Hände. That is grammatically incorrect because sich waschen is a reflexive verb. So we have ich wasche, I wash. What do I wash? The hands, and that is the direct object. Whose hands are they? They're my hands, so I use the dative indirect object reflexive pronoun mir. Ich wasche mir die Hände. You also notice that we're talking about hands, and so this direct object is going to be plural. Ich wasche mir die Hände. I wash my hands. As a second example, wäschst du dir die Haare? Are you washing your hair? We have wäschst du is our verb subject. Our direct object, are you washing? What are you washing? The hair. Whose hair is this? You are the indirect object here, so dir, wäschst du dir die Haare? Are you washing your hair? Again, this one takes a little getting used to, that it's this plural, die Haare, and we can't say wäschst du deine Haare oder wäschst du dein Haar. Although a person would probably understand you, it's grammatically incorrect because it is a reflexive verb, sich waschen, and needs this reflexive pronoun. Wanted to give you a third example here with that same verb that we saw with the direct object and accusative, sich rasieren, to shave. Ich rasiere mir die Beine. I shave my legs. So I shave, what do I shave? The legs are the direct object. Whose legs are they? They're my legs, so I use the dative reflexive pronoun mir. Ich rasiere mir die Beine. I shave my legs. Rasierst du dir das Gesicht? Are you shaving your face? Again, are you shaving? What are you shaving? The face is the direct object, das Gesicht. The indirect object reflexive pronoun dir is used here because you are both the subject and the indirect object here. Rasierst du dir das Gesicht? So I mentioned this just a few moments ago, but this is really important, and it's a mistake that a lot of English speakers make when they are still learning the German language. It's important to note that the reflexive verb always uses a reflexive pronoun, not a form of mine with a body part. So let's look at some correct and incorrect usages here. So if we have the English sentence, I wash my hands. This is the verb sich waschen, which is a reflexive verb. Correct to say, ich wasche mir die Hände. It's never correct to say, ich wasche meine Hände. A speaker of German would understand what you are saying. They would just know that your German grammar isn't perfect yet, that you're just learning. You can put the words together and it would make sense to them. It's just not grammatically correct. A second example, I shave my legs. The correct way to do this, because sich rasieren is a reflexive verb, ich rasiere mir die Beine. It's never correct to say, ich rasiere meine Beine. And a third example using that sich putzen, are you brushing your teeth? The correct way to say this, putzt du dir die Zähne? And it would be incorrect to ever say, putzt du deine Zähne? So it's a reflexive verb, sich putzen. We have to have putzt du dir with a reflexive pronoun, die Zähne. All right, the last step I want to do is I want you to pause the video and see if you could fill in the reflexive pronoun in each of these sentences. These are all ich and du situations, which are the ones where you really have to think about, am I or are you the subject and direct object, accusative, so mich and dich, or am I or you the subject and indirect object, so mir und dir. So pause the video, see if you can figure all these out. Now let's take a look at them. So, duschst du? Hopefully you answered. Dich. Duschst du dich? Are you showering? Ich rasiere. Gut. Mir die Arme. I am shaving my arms. Wäschst du dir die Hände? Are you washing the hands? So in the ich rasiere mir die Arme, wäschst du dir die Hände, we have another object here, and this body part is the direct object, which means my reflexive pronoun is the indirect object. So that's a really easy thing to look for. If you're filling in or having to decide, is it mich or mir, dich or dir, is there a body part listed? Then it's probably going to be data. Nächster Satz. Ich käme mir die Haare. Habt ihr das richtig gehabt? Did you get that right? Gut. So, I comb, what do I comb? The hair. Whose hair? My hair. So, ich käme mir die Haare with the dative or reflexive pronoun. Wann hast du dir das Bein gebrochen? When did you break your leg? So, when did you break? What did you break? The leg? Whose leg? Your leg. Wann hast du dir das Bein gebrochen? Ich bade mich. I bathe myself. So there's no object here as a direct object. So you, ich, are both the subject and the reflexive pronoun direct object. So ich bade mich. Und fühlst du dich wohl? Do you feel, hello Rodian, do you feel well? There is no object here. So du and dich are both the subject and the direct object. Fühlst du dich wohl? So hopefully those examples helped to bring everything into focus here. If you are lost and confused and you're one of my students, please send me a message in Schoology or shoot me an email, and I am happy to help you figure this all out. You can also check out the additional videos that I posted on our Schoology page from Herr Antrim. Okay, tschüss, bis zum nächsten Mal.
Tschüss von Raskatzen und Rodian. Tschüss alle. Tschüss.